I'm Kathy Terrell. I am a master gardener. I've been a master gardener here in Lake County for about 24 years. Pat Jared, who is now retired from the Master Garden program, actually put this program together many years ago, and it's been revised because as research changes with Ohio State, which is our School of Agriculture down there, then we have to revise some way of thinking and doing and some of the actions that we take as gardeners. So it's putting your garden to bed, and I think we're all there. I know I am. I mean, it's cold. Like I said, we're all sitting with our jackets on today. So we're gonna get started. So we're gonna start with 4 different areas that make up extension. And the last of these areas is the agriculture and natural resources, and that is us. That's where Master Gardeners line up. And the bottom is a very good website for general purpose questions of any nature. And I always recommend to people to when you look at websites, always go to something with an .edu or .org at the end. These are research-based areas. They're not .coms, which always are, usually pretty good websites, but they usually try to sell you something ultimately. So keep that in mind as you're going through the websites. And our Lake County office is at this address in Painesville. We've moved into the center of the square, and we are there now with our hotline and through the end of this month. So every Tuesday morning from April through October, you can call between 9 and 11 and talk to a master gardener with any of your gardening questions. And if they don't have an answer for you, they'll be glad to look one up, take your name, address, send you a reply, things like that. So that's what we're doing. We're here for the service. And so here we are, fall gardening. Fall arrived September 22nd. We've had a beautiful stretch of weather, but boy, the Monday after fall arrived, we knew fall had arrived. The temperatures changed that drastically. It's a beautiful time of year. We do want to enjoy each season. So right now we're starting to get some peak colors where our grasses and our hydrangeas and our mums are all blooming. So a lot of people plant specifically for fall bloom, and we should all try to have something interesting in the yard, even in the dead of winter, so that we can enjoy even the view out of our window. But today's program is going to kind of dwell on some of the things you need to do to get ready with the changes that are coming with fall. It used to be that good garden practice was considered get out there as soon as all the leaves are down and rake them all up, blow them away, get rid of them, bag them. Well, research has found that that's not the best thing to do anymore. We don't want to get rid of all the leaves because the leaf litter is where our tiniest creatures, microorganisms, and the insects winter over. So if we get rid of all the leaves, cut down all the stems, and do it all in a haste, then we're kind of losing some of those insect creatures that help us with pollination and keeping the food system, the food web going. So we want to think of fall cleanup now as a marathon. Do it in your time, in good time, but don't do it all at once. We don't want to just vacuum the whole thing, get all the leaves out. Take your time with it. Leave some of the stems and leave the leaves if you can. So we're going to talk about each of these things in more detail. So why do we clean up our gardens? Well, it does help us if we want to put down amendments in the fall, whether that's compost, cow manure, or mulch, things like that might prevent some plants from heaving throughout the winter. So it's a good time to clean up and cut down some things so we can get to the soil better. Right now, hostas are starting to go by the wayside, and they can be cut. There's really nothing beneficial for an insect in a hosta, and they really turn into mush, and they harbor slugs and diseases. So we want to control the disease and insects that come along with some of the untidiness in our gardens. It also does save some time in spring when we're ready to really get outdoors and plant. And really, our average frost can come anywhere between September and October 15th. So we're really living on borrowed time right about now, especially here in Northeast Ohio. So those are all good reasons to get out there and clean up the garden. Now, if you have annuals and vegetables from your garden, You want to be able to throw them in your compost pile as long as there's no disease or issues with them. If they have powdery mildew or other issues like Monarda sometimes does, or even sometimes your tomato plants get the powdery mildew diseases on them, or insects, you just want to get rid of those and put them in your yard waste bin. But otherwise, they're safe to put on your compost pile. And it's a good thing to put on your compost pile. After the first frost, when they get blackened and ugly, well, I hate to tell you this, but we pulled out my community garden yesterday. It was a nice day to do it. The tomatoes were starting to get thick-skinned, as they do at the end of the year. Peppers, the nights are getting cooler. Our peppers were not growing really anymore. We had cut them back a couple weeks ago to try to promote what was still there to fill in instead of getting the baby peppers that are kind of bitter. And it's really the time of year to kind of get everything cleaned up. Now, we could have stayed in there till October 31st. We're with the Lake Metro Parks gardens in Willoughby there, but there aren't many people left in those gardens right now. So if you know, we haven't had a first frost here, but really by the beginning of November, we're going to probably have a frost in the next couple of weeks. So that'll end our growing season for sure. So I don't think we were premature. I just think we did it on a good day because it wasn't raining, it wasn't blowing, we have fencing to take down. There was a lot of work there. Took us a couple of hours, but it's all done. And we harvested a bushel basket, even our last harvest, peppers, some tomatoes. We had a big cabbage we left because we didn't need it until now. So now that's the time you can pull out your gardens, your vegetable gardens, if you haven't already done so. And then if you pull out the entire plant, I don't need to do that there because they come through with big tractors and plow everything under the whole length of it. But if you have your home garden, you can, I've done this talk a couple times this year already, and a lot of people say, well, they don't pull them out by the roots. Well, you don't have to, but some of these vines and bushes get very thick stems. So you have to really cut them down very close to the soil line. I prefer to pull them, shake off the soil, put it on the compost pile. But that's your preference. So we're cleaning up the perennials by cutting down some of the stems. And the way I think about this is, I've had coneflowers, and this picture shows the echinacea, the purple coneflower, and the bees and the insects are still visiting those. The birds are now visiting them for seeds. But I've had black-eyed Susans already start flopping over, and they're kind of getting in the way of other things, or my enjoyment of other things, or my ability to mow my grass. So I'm not cutting it all down, but I am cutting select ones down as they're going by the wayside. Those stacks and stems will become homes for some insects. So if you don't want to cut them all the way, we used to say cut to the ground or leave a couple inches up from the ground so you know where plants are. But right now we're saying if you can leave some of the stalks and stems, leave some for the overwintering insects that use them for their houses. This is a really good website. I do have a reference page at the end of the talk with a couple websites, and this one is also there. But it talks about what to do, what to cut down. So we do want to cut down the plants that have diseases or insects problems and not put them on the compost pile. The hostas, they're ready to go already. Plants that have blackened or browning foliage or that are adding no interest to the landscape. Don't cut down your grasses now. They're shining right now. They're beautiful. They're blowing in the breeze. You can enjoy those all winter. Anything that's beneficial out your window, things you want to look at, feeding the birds, feeding the animals, or just blowing in the wind is a thing of beauty, especially once we get really housebound and you're putting those puzzles together like Hallie said, instead of out in your garden. But I always tell people, if you're leaving your grasses up, which I do, I try to leave mine up until about February. Then on a nice, kind of warmer day in February, get out there and then cut them. Because the winter winds will start breaking them apart and they'll blow all over into your neighbor's yard. And they won't be so happy about that. So you want to take care of some of those grasses as you go through the season. But I would enjoy them right now, along with your mums and things like that. Let's enjoy each season a little bit. What we don't want to cut, like we just said, the Joe Pye weed, the sedums, all those seed heads are there, and the birds are still going crazy. I had birds on my dogwood tree like crazy yesterday. Guess what? Winter is officially here in the bird world. I saw a junco, 2 juncos yesterday. Now the junco is a bird that travels here for the winter from Canada. I know, that's what I felt like. But their food sources aren't there. That's why the birds move around. It's not because it's cold and they want to go to Florida. It's because their food isn't available. So they are coming here already. So that's like a first sign. We used to always say, oh, the red-winged blackbird is a first sign of spring, or the eastern bluebird. But some of those birds are wintering over now. Like the eastern bluebird doesn't go away anymore. Our climate has changed a bit. So some of these, it has affected the birds and other creatures. But the black-eyed junco is here now. And I was like, oh, so my first sign it's winter, because they'll be here all winter now. And they mostly hop around. They are dark gray with like a white breast. They're really on the ground a lot. So they're eating seeds that drop out of the feeders and things. But we're getting there. So some of these plants that provide interest for our insects and our birds, and obviously the evergreens and the semi-evergreens are coming into their own right now, it's sort of like the grasses. So we're not cutting those things down. And that, like I said, it's up to you. If you have a plant that you want to save, you should have brought it in the house already because it's been very cold the last couple of nights. But look how beautiful those grasses look up against the snow. And they make a noise too. Not that we're out or opening our window to hear that noise, but they do make a noise, and the birds will move through them. And it gives creatures like even fox. We get fox through here. We get bear through here. Did you know that? I've had black bear tracks, and scat is the proper word. The droppings from the bear in my backyard. I had it confirmed because I was like, what is this? It's a big dog? No, it was a bear. So leave those up all winter and just enjoy them as the sun goes through them, and then use the time to just take a look at the landscaping all around you. Now, how do we cut these things down? Well, on those grasses, some grasses have to be cut with a chainsaw if they're really thick. And here's what happens with perennials. Perennials will grow, the first year they're very small, right? And the second year, they creep, they get bigger, and they say the third year they leap. So sometimes by the third or fourth year, you have to divide those perennials. What happens is the middle of it dies out, and nobody wants that. So it's best to pull out all of the perennial, dig it all out, divide it up, throw away the brown, dead stuff in the middle, because that's not going to do anything for you. But we want to make sure that we're using clean pruners when we clean our perennials, and sometimes hedge clippers or hedge trimmers for the bigger plants. Oh, here's one of those precious plants that somebody brought inside. I did this the other day because I have a fuchsia that I've had for many years. But it won't last in our winters here. So you have to bring these potted things. I put it in the ground this year because it got so big. But it's in the house again. I've had it at least for 7 years now. Successfully, you never know. I mean, you're taking a risk when you bring these things inside. You try to debug it and do all that stuff. It may or may not make it this year. We don't know, but all we can do is try. So if you have any potted material that you want to get in, make sure you're getting it in now. You move out all my houseplants, and the last couple days they've been walking their way back in my house after properly getting them sprayed and debugged and etc. Of course, when you bring in houseplants or things that you want to keep, you're going to want to give them as much light as you can. So even if it's a fuchsia and it's used to shade, when you first bring things into your house in the fall, you got to keep them close to the windows, because the outdoor light is really different than our house light. It's much brighter overall outside. The opposite is true on the other end of the season. If you're taking things out in the spring, you can't just take, even some of your succulents, you can't just put in the sun because they'll get burned. So it has to adjust gradually. So now's the time to pull those plants in from your landscape if you haven't already done so. Also, another good thing to do is store your pots. Clean them up, get them stored, especially porous pots. Those will crack if they're left outside. Plastic, no. But if you have specialty pots that you want to clean and preserve, give them a good wash with some soapy water and bleach water. 9 parts water to 1 part bleach is all it takes to disinfect the pot. But you want to do that pretty soon. We're going to talk a little bit about composting, but we're not getting into a lot of detail about it. That could be a whole nother class. But hopefully you have a compost pile. When you do have a compost pile, we want to make sure that you can use your pump, put your pumpkin in there, put your decaying plants in there. This last picture showed like your potted plants, like you have annuals. I'm still saving mine. Maybe trash day, everything will go, or the compost pile will get some of this stuff. But it's a good way to get your compost pile started. You don't want to put any disease material in your compost pile or any fungal material in your compost pile. Leaves are good, even coffee grounds. You don't want to put anything you can put a lot of your produce that you eat inside into a compost pile, but you don't want to ever put meat or anything like that. It will turn the pile rancid, and it could also attract creatures you don't want to attract to your yard. And always shred. If you're making a compost pile with some of the leaves you're cutting on the grass right now or collecting, always shred the leaves for a compost pile, because it helps it break down faster. On the other hand, if we're keeping a nice bed over here for those insects to hide in all winter, we don't want to shred those leaves because we're shredding them probably. So we want to just keep some areas where we can leave the leaves. Compost chemistry, as you can see, the top materials, autumn leaves, straw, the brown materials are materials that are high in carbon. And you want to make sure your compost pile has a 50-50 ratio, basically brown and green materials. The materials that are high in nitrogen are your green materials, your grass clippings, coffee grounds, manure. So if you do choose to have a compost pile, it's the best thing you can do. Once the compost is all it has to go through a whole cycle, so it might take a whole year if you just got a new pile started. It has to bake. It bakes through the summer. You have to hydrate it. You might have to, especially this year, we've had a lot of drought at the end of our season here. So you want to make sure that it's watered and turned. And when you're all done with all that, then you get this really nice compost, brown gold, the gardeners call it, because it's so good for your plants. So if you can get a little compost pile going, or even throw out some of your coffee grounds and clippings and stuff. Although I'm going to caution you, don't use a lot of oak leaves on your pile. They have a lot of tannins in them that really aren't, if you have a lot, like I have a huge oak tree, so there's a lot of oak leaves. So it can't overwhelm the pile because the oak leaves really are too strong and stringent to put on your pile. You can put some of them on, but probably not all of them. But this is really a nice product to put back in your garden in the spring. Spread it around, put it up along your shrubs, your plants, put it in your vegetable garden. So that's one of the benefits of getting a compost pile. Now, what about pruning? I would say do not prune right now. What does pruning do? Pruning stimulates new growth. We are going to get another nice week next week. I think we heard in the 70s again. I mean, we've had roller coaster rides of weather, but the pruning could stimulate new growth on the edges where you just pruned. Now all that growth won't be hard enough to winter and you'll just lose it. So do not prune now. The only thing that I prune at the end of the season is evergreens, boxwood, things like that you can use like in your arrangements and your wreaths and your swags and things like that. But you're not going to prune anything right now that would you damage it. The best time to prune flowering shrubs is right after they're done flowering. So if it's a forsythia, that's in the spring. If it's hydrangea, well, that's a tricky one because there's there's a different kind, the paniculata, which you can prune at any time, and the mop, the big old mop hydrangeas, which you have to be careful because they grow their new flowers on old wood. So you don't want to cut away the old wood. But things like Rose of Sharon, Things that done blooming in the fall, you can cut them back right now. And it's the best time to do that. So to prevent winter damage now, I was talking to a couple people here that I've had 2 tornadoes in my yard in the last 2 years. One did extensive damage last year. So we planted some, like we had 20 trees down last year. We had another couple this August. Every August, I'm afraid to go anywhere now because the storms kind of keep coming through. But I planted several new trees, even last fall. But because of our drought this year, I've had to make sure we're watering even those trees about an inch a week or until the ground freezes, which once we get snow and it gets hard, then we know the ground is really frozen, and they'll take care of themselves then. But right now, you want to make sure things are taken care of, especially if you've just transplanted things into your yard. And there's a lot of good sales on at the garden centers now because they know they got to get rid of this stuff, or they got to winter it over, and they'd rather have you winter it over. So you can get some really good deals now. The anti-desiccants are things you can spray on your plants. They sell them at all the garden centers, and what that does, it prevents like salt sprays, like if you lived on a main road and they're always coming down with salt trucks and plows and things, and windburn too. Because if you're planting things out and you're getting a lot of wind on it, sometimes it dries the plants out like the salt does. So the anti-desiccants take care of that, help them get keep a little moisture. And then people do sometimes put shields and shelters on their plants for that same reason, to kind of block the wind. Our winds predominantly come from the northwest. So it depends on where things are placed in your yard. And also, our yards have little microclimates in them. So, just because somebody else's yard, has to be blocked, maybe yours has a natural block. Maybe there's a hedgerow there that's blocking things on your side. So all these things will just help to protect the investment that we have in our landscape area. So if you are going to go to the garden center and plant trees and shrubs, the cooler temperatures are less stressful to get these plants in the ground. And they will still have some time to get established. And dig the hole twice as wide and as deep as the plant is. You don't have to plant the plant deeper. As a matter of fact, you don't want to plant the plant any deeper than it is in the pot or in the balled and burlap. Because what that does, it creates some roots coming from the trunks, and that's not a good thing. What you need to do, like we had to brace up our trees and protect them from deer damage last year. So we all have deer problems in our yards. So you want to wire fence it, put posts up there, and give it some protection that way. But planting your tree, you want to go, because the roots are going to go out to the side, and the depth really shouldn't change from what it is in the pot. Now, if you buy a balled and burlap tree, a lot of places will say, you don't have to take it off. You don't have to take the burlap off. You don't have to take the metal ball off. But I'm here to tell you that you probably should, because the metal ball, I would definitely take it off. It's just, it's going to be metal forever. Metal doesn't go away. The burlap could eventually decompose, but sometimes they're pinned so tight to the root ball of the tree, that, they don't let the roots come out and naturally get established. So you want to make sure you're taking off the burlap. And even if you can't get underneath the ball, just cut it away as best you can, and it will grow lateral roots for the tree. They're showing planting a tree here, and they do actually have 2 people helping here plant the tree, and sometimes that is a good idea because these things can get very heavy. But you do want to get a good sturdy root system on it. Like I said, with our winds, I would definitely, because what they act as like a parachute. When the tree's up here and the trunk is here and they're newly planted, they might fall over with a good wind. So make sure you're bracing it, staking it when you plant their tree. It's also a good time to divide your perennials. We talked about that a little bit, and to dig up the whole plant and then just put the best parts back in, or give some to your neighbors, or put them around your yard. But this picture shows some hostas, I believe somebody was digging up. And perennials really want to all plants really want to live, so you can't really do too much damage. I know people that have taken a hoe and they've just stomped on the roots ball just to get it apart. Then they planted the parts, 2 or 3 or 4 different parts, and everything. They do want to live, so it's not a problem if you damage them a little bit. As long as you get a crown and some roots, you're going to get a new plant coming up. So this just shows you how they're cutting at the root. And they can be quite strong. So I know people that have used pitchforks to pull them apart, one here, one there. Those hoary knives that you use with a blade. So, and the plants do much better for it. Like I said, they get those bare spots in the middle of the perennials, and it's time to divide. It's ugly, number one. And the plant really will do much better if you can divide it. Now, there's a few tips. They say to choose the right day, but what does that mean? I don't think there really is a right day. I mean, their right day is kind of like a cloudy, cool day. Now, some of us don't have the inclination to go out on a cloudy, cool day. I want to be outside when it's warm. And so when the best day is when it's best for you. The only thing is, no matter what you do, when you're planting it, you're going to have to water it. And if you get really strong sun, like we did get some strong sun the last couple of weeks, and we're expecting more later this week, you might want to protect it from strong afternoon sun by putting a brown bag on it or something to cover it up, shield it a little bit, just till it gets established. And it will tell you when it stands up straight, And then you can also apply mulch if you want, if that will keep the moisture. And the mulch does control the temperature of the soil. So right now, mulch is okay because our soils are still warm. In the spring, I tell people, don't put your mulch down too soon because our soils stay cool in the spring. If you put your mulch on before May, which we get some beautiful spring weather, but your soil is still cool. So you're keeping the cool in. It acts as a blanket. Oh, and also, we're going to talk about digging and storing summer bulbs. If you have anything like canna lilies, calla lilies, dahlias, gladiolas, now's the time to dig them up and clean them off and store them somewhere in a basement, a window well, in a brown paper bag. You don't need any green, you just want the roots and the bulb. And so cut off all the foliage and clean it up the best you can, because these plants usually are not hardy here. I'm not saying always, but they're not really hardy in this zone. Now, where I live, just down 306, there's this fire station, all brick, and those guys for years would have canna lilies coming back on the side wall. Well, they had their own little microclimate. It was a south-facing brick wall. Those guys didn't dig those bulbs out every year. But, if you want them to come back, I would advise digging them out. If you have dahlias, you want to take off the last blooms right now, or maybe you've already done that, but wait until a first frost. Because sort of like the dahlia tuber is still getting nutrients from the green growth that's all around it. Sort of like a daffodil in the spring. You don't want to just cut off all the leaves. So time to dig and store the bulbs. Big one, to rake off the leaves off the lawn, especially if you have a lot of trees, because they can get really thick really fast and smother your grass and your lawns. Now, like we talked about leaving some of these leaves, so maybe you have a spot, we blow all of ours to the back. We have a rough area in the back that we kind of blow ours to, and there's a whole bunch. You can walk knee deep in leaves back there. So you don't have to be so fastidious as we have been in the past, but in order to keep your grass healthy and green, you want to make sure your leaves come off of the lawn. Okay, we talked about this a little bit about reasons for mulch, preventing the weed growth, soil temperature. It also reduces the heaving of these smaller plants in the winter, or plants that you just put in the garden. It adds some organic matter. And use the right kind of mulch. Do not use anything that's shredded pellets, because there's cellulose in those pellets, and that's not good for our plants. So any pine bark or the nuggets, everything like that is fine. Or the shredded mulch, bark mulch, but it also helps with reducing erosion. Like I put in some lavender plants this year, because I have sun now. I never was able to grow it. So there's good sides to having trees being taken down. But with the lavender, I've noticed some of the soils are washing away a little bit. So put some mulch around there or some additional soil. And I was gifted. I borrowed and begged, and I didn't steal, but some lady in our neighborhood grows these tropical banana trees. They are hardy in Ohio. Not the ones you get from like in the pots at Home Depot, but there is a tropical banana tree that she gave me offshoots of them this spring. And I have them on my deck. And all she does with them is mulches them in the fall. Cuts them down. And her brother gave her the original tubers from New York State. So there is such a creature out there. I was really happy to get it. So I'm going to be mulching those bananas. Hopefully they'll winter over for me too, because hers are bigger than her house. They're beautiful if you like that tropical look, which I do. Also, it's a good time. I planted my garlic just the other day in my garden. If you're planting anything right now, garlic is perfect. So easy. And I'm here to tell you don't have to buy specially treated garlic. My son proved me wrong on that, because my husband bought me the garlic from Gales. It was $10 for like 2. Anyway, he just planted organically grown garlic, and he got garlic. So as long as you're planting your garlic, plant it now. It's a fun thing. You put it in the ground, you water it. I throw some straw or mulch or something on top of it. And come June, end of June, July, you're harvesting your garlic. It's just in time for all your garden things, tomatoes and all that good flavors. So it's a good time to put your garlic out and enjoy them grow. They'll grow right through the snow if we get snow this winter. Now the snow does help us sometimes. The snow acts as the blanket just like the mulch does. So when we don't get snow, we have other host of problems, because those drying winds and heaving plants will become even more so. And also, if you've ever noticed, if you ever had snow and like on some plants, and below the plants they're fine, below the snow they're fine, but above the snow they're brown and dying, it's because that part of the plant wasn't covered by this blanket of snow. So snow is a beneficial thing, but our climate is changing. So I know my grandson wants to come here for Christmas, and he's hoping for snow, and I'm telling him, I don't know. It hasn't snowed at Christmas in a while. So I'm not complaining. As a Northeast Ohio person, born and bred, I've lived through the winter of '79, all those big snowstorms. Yeah. So no, we're good with what we've got right now. Besides, we can't do anything about it anyway. So if you do plant and you do want to mulch things, make sure you're putting down the good mulch we talked about. Also, don't bring the mulch all the way up to the trunk of any tree, shrub, perennial. You want to leave a ring around. Here's a tree stalk. You want to go at least 3 inches around without any mulch, because we don't want to put the mulch right up to the plant. It creates disease vectors, places insects can get into the bark. And somebody in another program said, oh, is that volcano mulching I've heard about? Yeah, don't do that. And you only need to put about 2 to 3 inches of mulch down. You don't need to put it down every year if your mulch is still good. So that's something to think about too, come in the springtime. When to mulch, like we said, once the ground freezes or after your plant material is done, about 2 inches, and composted cow manure, peat moss, or shredded leaves are good mulches. So don't forget to harvest and clean up any of your nuts, fruit trees, apple droppings from your apple tree. If there's anything left, the deer have kind of gotten all of mine already. But the nuts the acorns are still coming down, hickory, all that stuff. So it's just nice to get it all picked up. There's still plenty for the squirrels, the chipmunks, the birds, let me tell you. We have a lot but if you get it off of your lawn, it creates it's nicer if you can get a nice clean lawn, although I'm working hard at that. Because my oak tree is huge, and about the only tree really left in my yard after the tornadoes, but it's dropping a lot of nuts. So I don't know if it's in some distress, because it's getting more sun than it ever did before, but we're getting a lot of nut drop this year. now is the time to plant your spring bulbs. So plant your spring bulbs. I did this the other day and make sure that you can plant anything. They're hyacinths, tulips, crocus now. And the things like the snowdrops and the daffodils, the deer do not eat. Anything in that family, the amaryllis basically family, they will not eat. So you're safe. We're safe. Every year, the tulips they will eat. So if you people try all kind of crazy things. My neighbor hangs Irish Spring soap above his tulips, to try to keep the deer. They don't like the strong flavor of the scent, but if they're hungry, they're eating. I worked with the Lake Metro Parks for many years, and they would eat holly plants, holly, pointy, prickly holly, because that was the only food they could find once the snow covers and they're seeing, just things sticking out of the snow. So they have to survive every day out there. So they are going to eat anything they can. They'll even eat the bark off the trees if they're hungry, but not those daffodil bulbs. So it's really not a good time to fertilize. You can top dress some of the evergreens, things like that, and do that like after the leaf drop. Because right now, if you have a lot of leaves dropping already, like in my yard I have some, and you throw fertilizer around, you're going to rake that all out of there. So you don't really want to, when we're fertilizing, we're trying to make stronger plants, but right now we're not really need to fertilize too much of our plant material. It's already done. We're done for the season. So come spring, that's a whole other thing. Roses. Now, if you have a very large outgrown rose, like the big ramblers or the climbers, you can cut down, in general, any plant to about a third. If you have an old woody forsythia, if you have an old rose, without harming the plant will still come back and live. But with the roses, they want you to, this is old thinking too, we do not prune in the fall anymore. On the roses, the shrub roses we have, the knockout roses, those things don't need to be pruned. They kind of self-clean themselves. And if you need to prune, the best time is in March, because then you can see what's dead. Right now, you might be cutting off green, or what looks dead, but it could already be starting to go through a dormant phase. I just have miniature roses, but if you have any of the fancy roses, I would say err on the side of waiting until March and then do a good trimming. Unless you really are a rosarian, I guess that's the proper term, where you have special roses and you're, putting mulch around them or leaves, shredded leaves. And people that love their roses will do that, because our winter winds especially could wreak havoc on some of these plants. Fall lawn care. Well, it was a tough summer. We had a lot of drought. We reseeded our whole tree lawn, which is not a lot because I'm on a cul-de-sac, so it's kind of narrow and little down there. But it was bad because it was a heat sink down, lots of concrete. Even my sprinkler, I couldn't get down far enough, try to keep the grass green this summer. But the time to do any seeding or overseeding is now. Maybe a little late now. We're going to still have another couple weeks of warm weather. We stay in the fall because we typically get our more water, more rain, and we have. But you want to make sure that you are able to get a couple of cuts with your mower on it. It strengthens the grass. So get your seed down now, and then don't worry about the fertilizer until like November. Because believe it or not, I'm usually cutting my grass December 1st. We don't live too far from here, but it's still pretty mild, and the grass is still growing. So sometimes you'll see the grass looks like it needs something else, but November is the last time you want to do anything. And that's another thing that's changed. They used to say the NPK on the bags, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium numbers. Nitrogen is for greening, phosphorus is for roots and shoots, and the potassium is for general health of the plants. But it's hard to find a high phosphorus fertilizer for a lawn service now, because they've kind of banned them. They've gone, how we can't put phosphorus in our automatic dishwasher detergents? That's all gone. They've also taken it out of the fertilizer. You can still buy it like in The phosphorus is good for, like, if you're growing annuals and you're, Miracle Grow, whatever, with a high middle number, that's for blooms and, roots. But you can't find a lawn fertilizer like that anymore. If you can, it's only going to be a very nominal number. So the biggest number is the nitrogen number, and that's basically just for greening, keeping your grass green. So you really can't put too much else down. That runoff goes into our lakes, our streams, etc. So the EPA, etc., it's all been changed in the last couple of years. So fall lawn care. And don't forget your tools. Still using, we're still digging, dividing, etc. But once you're all done, you want to make sure you remove excess soil or dirt off of these things, store them in a dry place. Some people use buckets of sand or oil, but as long as it's in a dry place, they usually don't rust that way. And then also a few other things with equipment is to drain all your garden hoses before you put them away. Run your mower out of gas or put an additive in the tank for winter prep. You can sharpen your mower blade, just get a jump on the season, or maybe you have to replace your mower. Like, I think we got to replace our mower. Although we can't really buy one now, it's sort of like sales are done. And don't forget to sharpen your garden tools, because it helps, sort of like a dull knife in the kitchen. You could hurt yourself and not cut the bread right. You want to make sure that your tools are sharp and clean, and then repair and replace them as needed. So now that you've done all those things, and if you want to leave a refuge for some of the wildlife to enjoy winter too, don't get rid of all your leaves. Don't cut all your stems. Leave these smallest of our creatures here to enjoy the winter too. And then once we get done with all of our fall chores, we can sit back and look out our window, and maybe we'll have some great views to look at too. So thanks for coming. I have one resource slide here. The first one is about No Mow May, which is a thing a few years ago, came out of England, which has a little bit different climate than us. Basically, Ohio State information says, by not mowing your grass until the end of May or later, you could be creating other issues. So it's not a good thing. We're just saying, maybe you don't have to put fertilizer down so early in the spring. Our grasses green up naturally. All the lawn carers in my neighborhood, everybody's lawn care is out there greening up the grass. And I'm like, it's fine. It's going to green. It's going to green naturally. So wait a little bit to put your fertilizers on, because otherwise you might be mowing and mowing and mowing, because fertilizer basically creates stimulus in your grass, and it grows and grows. And the other one is about cutting down some of the flowers and the perennials.